Our artifact is the push and pull toy car made out of recyclable materials. Our unit is for Foundation to Year 2, and this presentation is created and presented by me, Martina Garrow, Jessie Andrew, and Susan Rigel. For the experiential learning cycle, for concrete experience, the idea of using recyclable materials to create a push or pull toy car is used to develop an idea on why using recyclable materials is effective, and how a push or pull method can affect how an object moves or changes. The reflective observations we made were that the reflective practice allowed us to determine the successful outcome of the project, working through the design cycle and investigating how it is to be effective by using materials that are recyclable, accessible, and analyzing whether the toy car can actually be pushed or pulled. The abstract conceptualization. After conducting research, we started our designing process and began to consider which materials are recyclable, accessible at home, suitable to use for children, suitable to use for the artifact itself, and the overall successful outcomes of the push and pull motion. We also considered the challenges that may be experienced when creating this artifact, whether the recyclable materials were going to work for both the motions or maybe just one, if the recycled materials were effective, if they were accessible for the children, or if students were able to follow instructions and use materials properly. We were able to identify how the push and pull method affects the motion of the toy car through making observations and evaluations throughout the process. And the active experimentation. During the process of making our artifact, we critically evaluated how effective the materials were in making the artifact, whether it can be push and pulled, and we were also able to observe the results of making and using the artifact in the evaluation stage.
The problem we faced when generating ideas for our toy car was that during this time with COVID-19, we can't just go to the shops to purchase materials that we can use. So we needed to think of what we can use around the house to make our toy car, as well as how we were going to create a push-pull for. When investigating like ideas, we came across the John Deere push truck. While this design is really well done, we didn't have the materials to complete something like this, as we required materials that could be found and recycled in the household. We had to carefully consider placement of wheels when we designed and created our toy car, as it was a longer chassis, so the wheels could not be placed in the middle because would then act like a seesaw, as it would be unbalanced. So we needed to ensure the wheels were attached towards the front and back of the chassis to ensure the wheels would be able to rotate when pushed or.
When looking at the generating phase of the design cycle, the Victorian curriculum states that in this phase, students will develop and communicate ideas for a range of audiences. Here, students will make choices, weigh up options, consider alternatives, and document various design ideas and possibilities. For the creation of our car using recycled household materials, our generating phase was similar. Due to COVID, we were unable to meet face-to-face in order to discuss what we wanted to do. Instead, we used various media platforms, including Facebook Messenger, email, and Zoom calls to communicate ideas effectively. Once finalizing our ideas, 2 blueprints were made for our artifacts. While both blueprints used similar materials, one of our blueprints focused on using a pushing force to move the car, while the other focused on using a pulling force. Blueprints were drawn from 2 different views to provide an in-depth thought process to how our design would be. Next came the producing phase. When exploring this phase in the classroom environment, students apply a variety of skills and techniques to make design solutions in order to meet a specific need or purpose. Once again, the producing phase for this artifact that we created was similar. Our artifacts were created in one day using the blueprints that had been created previously. However, I had a little advantage up my sleeve. These artifacts were produced with the much needed assistance of my younger siblings and their creative minds. I was able to use their minds to adapt my ideas of how to place different materials together. Of course, this came with various unseen obstacles. While the blueprints were helpful, the two cars were made more or less so through trial and error. An example of this was during the wheel placement. Originally, I created holes for the skewers through the middle of the bottle, not realizing that in doing this, the wheels would not reach the floor and therefore would not allow the car to move. The cars were tested numerous times to ensure that A, they were made from recycled materials, and B, they moved when a force was placed upon them.
In curriculum code VCD-STS013, which states how people create familiar designed solutions and consider sustainability to meet person and local community needs. This design presents an easy, engaging, and informative way of how sustainable resources are effective in making artifacts, but also how we can use these materials from home, in the school environment, whether they need assistance when using these materials, or maybe even just following instructions. This design demonstrates how the push and pull method can affect the motion of the toy car, how the push and pull method can change its appearance, its size, its motion. Does it work? Do the wheels move? Do the materials stick together? This artifact uses a range of creative resources and materials that are effective for the earth and the environment. They're also recyclable. Children can reuse these materials, so they can even break the materials apart and create another design using the same materials that they used for the cars. It uses creative elements and principles. This artifact worked effectively as finding recyclable materials was easy, and the process of making the toy car was successful, and establishing the final outcome was not hard to determine or navigate. This artifact can be made in any setting, at home or at school. So if students wanted to try and make this at home as part of homework or self-interest, they could achieve successful results if they followed the right instructions and the right procedure. This artifact is also engaging. It has a great resource for students with learning difficulties who require more visual learning and using their fine motor movement skills throughout this learning process. This artifact is also fun, it's engaging, it provides an object that can be used and kept in long term. The evaluate process. So since the overall outcome was a success, we could aim to create different sized artifacts using recyclable materials of different sizes, so small, medium, large. So students would have made an artifact using materials with our artifact that we've actually made. The artifact was medium sized, so maybe the kids next time could use bigger or smaller materials to see if the shape or size of the materials used for the artifact are effective, if they can push or pull still, and if that works. We can allow students to decorate their own toy cars. They can paint them, they can use their fine motor skills more in the process of designing and creating. We can allow students to design and create their own artifacts. They can think outside the box, they can think independently, they can have the time and process to think of their own ideas. We can allow students to creatively try and make other designs, such as a truck or an aeroplane or any other pull or push motion, for example, an example of their choice. We can aim to create different types of artifacts that create the push and pull method. So different to a vehicle type artifact, they could aim to do something that flies with the same push force, or for example a paper plane or creating a kite.
During the planning and managing phase of the design cycle, we first all met over Zoom to speak about ideas for our artefact, how we could make it, what it was going to do, and what materials we could use. We then wrote down our ideas on a Google Doc so that everyone could add to it. When we then created a storyboard from this. From our storyboard, Susan then created a plan for our design, which we then as a group manipulated and changed to ensure our plan was going to work. For our group to work effectively and efficiently, each Monday we had a Zoom meeting at 4 p.m. to update each other on where we were up to and ask questions if we needed. We all worked together on our PowerPoint presentation through Google Slides so each team member was able to view and the work being completed. Our group also used a Facebook Messenger group to communicate with one another when we needed.
Implementation in schools. Creating a car out of recycled materials is a great activity that could be completed in school, particularly for students in Foundation to Year 2. Not only does it allow students to explore scientific themes involving forces, it incorporates a cross-curriculum focus on sustainability using recycled materials. This promotes students' problem-solving skills, collaborative work, and could even allow students to explore and modify their critical and creative thinking skills.